Hello, this is Paul Hoyt. Welcome to today's Office Hours presentation. Our Office Hours is a relaxed, informal, free mentoring program that I do every Monday at noon Pacific time. This recording is going to be available online along with some of the previous week's recording, and then all of the recordings are archived in our members area. The reasons I do this is because being a successful business owner, it can be just a tremendous experience, but it's really tough. You really do need training in the fundamentals of business in order to make your time as a business owner as least challenging as possible. I also want you to get to know me, because when you know me, you'll see that I really do care. But not only do I know a lot about business, but I really do care about you, and I want you to succeed. Our agenda is always the same. We have an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. I offer some closing remarks, some special offers, and an invitation for next week's session. Then we have open questions and answers. But before we get started with today's presentation, I want to extend a special invitation for you to join our Facebook group. I started one last week called Brilliant Business, and in Brilliant Business, my intention is to build this into a community of sharp and focused small business owners and micro business owners across the United States, where we'll post questions and support each other in the context of an online community. So go to Facebook and in the search bar type in Brilliant Business and request to join the group. I think it's open at this point in time. And I've also made a pinned post there, so you can I invite your comments on the subject of today's presentation, which is on working with attorneys. If you have attended or listened to more than 4 office hours presentations, or really 4 or more, then I want to speak with you personally. I've got a great offer for you. So please do me a favor and call me at 415-997-8001, or just go to www.schedulepaul.com and pick a time that works for you. Another important note is that I'm going to be off the next 2 weeks. So after 27 consecutive weeks of doing a brand new office hours presentation every week, I'm going to be off the next couple of weeks. And the reason is because I'm going to the CEO Space Business Growth Conference in Lake Las Vegas. Many of you know me from that environment. This will be forum number 48 for me, I believe. I've gone to every one but one for the last 9 years since I started. And it's my pleasure once again to be on faculty at the Business Growth Conference. And I'll be teaching a program a couple of times on the art and science of writing business plans. So if you are a CEO Space member, then come back at least for the weekend, and I'd be honored to see you there and have a private appointment. If you're not a CEO Space member, then reach out and talk to me about how you can become one and how that might help you move your business forward. So on to today's topics. Today's topic is, it just crashed. Oh, I didn't crash it because I clicked the wrong thing. Hang on just a second. There we go. Today's topic is your friends from the bar, working with attorneys. As I normally do, I try to tie the topic of the day back to one of the 7 key performance areas that I defined in my first book in 2004 called The Foundation Factor. And working with attorneys is all about leadership, because it's your responsibility to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens at your business. And the working with attorneys is also part of the operations area. As we'll talk in just a second, the number 1 success principle in the key performance area of operations is around having great agreements. On the agenda for today, we're going to talk about the importance of agreements a little bit. We'll talk about some inner issues that some folks have whenever it comes to working with attorneys. We'll talk about the many types of attorneys, and we'll dive into 5 of them individually in a little bit more detail, and then I'll offer some final thoughts. Let's first talk about the importance of agreement. As I mentioned, having great agreements is the number 1 business success principle in the key performance area of operations. It's your responsibility to make sure that you have great agreements, and not just verbally, but in writing and signed in writing. And to me, that's especially important between friends. So don't fall into the trap that says that since you and I are good friends, we can do business together without memorializing it in some way, without documenting our agreement in some way. Because the idea is that we want to be friends not only today and tomorrow, but for the lifetime, for our lifetime. And my experience is that when friends start doing business with each other, especially if it starts involving a lot of money or a lot of time, it is really, really important for you to make sure that you've documented your agreement in writing so that you understand that. That's because the friendship is precious. It's a treasure to you, and you want to make sure that it has the best possibility of being around for a very long time. So I strongly encourage you to have every significant agreement in writing and documented, and especially between friends. And once you have it in writing, then have it vetted by or reviewed by an attorney to make sure that you haven't left out something significant. General principle is that we work out the business terms first between ourselves, and then we go to our attorneys to memorialize it or to work out the legalese of the agreement to make sure that whatever we do will stand up in a court of law and it makes sense to us. And once you have the agreements, by the way, make sure your agreements are signed and filed in places where you can find them. It doesn't really help you that much to have an agreement that is agreed upon unless that agreement is signed, unless you can find your signed copy of the agreement in case of any conflict or any dispute. So that's why agreements are important. Agreements are important to make sure that you and I are communicating with each other, to make sure that we really understand what is expected of each other, what our roles and responsibilities are going to be today and tomorrow, and what compensation might be granted, if any, based upon the roles and responsibilities that we've had, so that we can continue with having a great business relationship and in many cases a great personal relationship as well. But what I find is that many small business owners and micro business owners have some inner issues about attorneys. They just don't understand legal language. They read a contract, and I've literally seen some of them almost throw up when they take a look at a contract because it is so out of their field of expertise and so out of their comfort zone that it just physically disturbs them. And they're just afraid of digging into it, afraid that they'll make a mistake, afraid that they'll be taken advantage of, afraid of just afraid of the whole process of forming agreements and putting them in writing and signing that. Some of my friends also don't want to spend the money on attorneys, and attorneys can be expensive, anywhere from $300 to $1,000 an hour. I have a client right now who's working with an attorney that charges $510 an hour. Here in Silicon Valley, I've seen attorneys that charge $1,000 an hour or more. Sometimes they'll say my normal rate is $500 an hour, but for you it's a special deal. It's only $250 or $300. But they're expensive. They're very, very expensive. So we want to use them judiciously. But that also causes people some inner issues because they're in a state of scarcity, because they just don't have a lot of funds, and they haven't budgeted properly to make sure that they have legal fees and legal guidance and counsel budgeted into their master budgets. So they don't want to spend the money, and that can be a problem. Here's a very important concept when it comes to working with attorneys, and it's the classic old adage that a stitch in time saves 9. Now, here's what that means, by the way. It took me a while to figure it out because not very many people will actually tell you what that means. What that means is that if you have a rip in a garment and you stitch it up today, that's a lot better than letting that small rip turn into a very large rip and taking 9 stitches tomorrow, which means that when you have a small problem, take care of it right now, because if you take care of it now, it's not going to turn into a big problem that costs you a lot of time and money later on. And that adage is perfect for when it comes to working with attorneys, because attorneys, when used proactively, are like insurance policies, very valuable insurance policies for your business. They prevent against loss in the case of a dispute or some sort of a disagreement down the road. So if you have an inner issue about working with attorneys, if you're just afraid of learning the language, if you don't want to spend the money, if you really would rather take the risk of having something nasty happen to you, then my advice is just get over it. Just get over it. Because as a business owner, you will need to work with attorneys. It is a good idea to work with attorneys. And you can either work with them proactively to save yourself time and money in the long run, or reactively when those claims and disputes happen because you had a poor agreement. And believe me, I've got personal experience with this. I've had poor agreements in the past, and they have caused me issues that I really realized that I should have stressed things more in my agreements, and I should have had this particular clause in my agreements, and they cost me a lot of time and a lot of money, not just with the client, but with the energy that sucked out of me for a few months. So my strong encouragement to you is that if you have any material contract at all, that you have that reviewed by an attorney so that you can avoid those mistakes that will slow you down or possibly shut you down. As it turns out, there are a lot of different types of attorneys out there. Here's 16 of them. You can have a bankruptcy attorney, a business law or a corporate law attorney, a civil rights attorney, a criminal defense attorney, a DUI or DWI attorney, employment law attorney, entertainment attorney, or estate attorney, or an intellectual property attorney, family and divorce attorneys, immigration attorneys, intellectual property attorneys, personal injury attorneys, property and real estate attorneys, and securities attorneys, and toxic tort attorneys. In my working with 400 businesses or so over the course of the last 13 years or so, I've worked with clients who have worked with every single one of these types of attorneys and more. And they may be, really depends on your business and the challenges that you face in the business as to the ones that you may want to engage with. But we're going to take a look at 5 of them in detail today and talk to you a little bit more. These are the ones that you're most likely to use: the business corporate law attorney, the employment law attorney, the estate attorneys, the intellectual property attorney, and the securities attorney. So let's take a look at each one of those one by one. First, the business and corporate law attorney. They help with corporate structure and governance. So if you have a business and it's not a sole proprietor, if you have an LLC, a C corporation, a subchapter S corporation, or a partnership, then you, by definition, have a corporate structure. And with every corporate structure comes required corporate governance, the required filing of the appropriate documents with the state, with getting the right tax documents in place, etc. And a business and corporate law attorney can help you do all that. They're also very good for reviewing the contracts, and I've talked a lot about the importance of having your attorney review your contracts, and it's typically the business and corporate law attorney that reviews your general contracts. We'll talk about the other types of agreements that are reviewed by the other kinds of attorneys we're going to dig deeply into here in just a minute. They also help with disputes and settlements. I hope you don't have very many of those, but it's very nice to have a business and corporate law attorney on your team whenever those arise. They help with forming partnerships and joint ventures, and they give you a lot of general business advice. What I find with accountants and with business consultants like myself and with attorneys, after you've worked with a few hundred businesses, you have a pretty good general understanding of business, and you can help people in a lot of different ways. So in addition to legal advice, attorneys also often provide general business advice in the ways that they have seen deals work in the past, in the same way that a good CPA can give you advice beyond just tax advice, and in the same way a business consultant or coach like myself can give you good advice that you might normally consider to be outside the domain. So I believe that every single business should have a business and corporate law attorney. So if you don't have one, then I encourage you to start poking around and asking people who might be a good business or corporate law attorney for them, for you in your business. By the way, if you have a C corporation or an S corporation, your corporate governance requirements are really quite robust. You do have to have a book, and you do have to have resolutions, and you do have to have bylaws. You do need to have a corporate seal and a corporate record, and attorneys can help you establish that or recreate one if you haven't had one and you've been in business for years. That's one of the things that they do quite often, is to help people get their corporate governance in order. The second type of attorney we want to take a look at in detail is an intellectual property attorney. Intellectual property attorneys, of course, help you protect your intellectual property. And that intellectual property comes in a lot of different flavors, trademarks and copyrights. And it also comes when you are signing the rights to use your image or your brand in the course of, say, a marketing agreement, or if you hire somebody to do a website, for example, or to conduct a marketing campaign for you. As typically in the context of those agreements will be some sort of an assignment of rights for them to use your image and your name. You got to watch out for that, because I have seen contracts out there where people thought that they were just giving somebody permission to use their name and their likeness in the scope of a very limited engagement, but what they signed away was somebody's opportunity to use their name and their likeness for anything that they chose to do it. So be sure to check with an attorney anytime that you have a contract with somebody where they're asking you to assign away some portion of your intellectual property rights. As it turns out, intellectual property attorneys come in a lot of different flavors. There are patent attorneys who just work on patents, patent searches, provisional patents, and making the final patent claims. There are attorneys who just do trademarks, and there are attorneys, typically not very many attorneys, that just do copyrights. And the reason is because copyrights is far less expensive to do on your own. It only costs like 35 or 45 bucks. It's a very simple process. So copyright attorneys will typically do other sorts of specialties within intellectual property as well. And you typically only engage a copyright attorney if you feel like somebody is bridging or broaching your copyright and infringing upon your copyright, and you need to get some relief from that. So most companies have an intellectual property attorney. I've engaged with intellectual property attorney for the trademarks that I have on some of the terms that I have come up with and use in commerce, terms like a business foundation profile or a phased growth strategy or business growth sequencing or the foundation factor, I think, are the 4 trademarks that I own. And trademarks are valuable to you because they add value to your business. Anytime that you can have intellectual property that you can verify and denote and memorialize through an agreement in using an intellectual property attorney, then it adds value to your company. And in the event of selling your company or selling a portion of your company to a securities attorney, then that intellectual property can actually add value to your company. The third type of attorney that I see a lot of people work with is a securities attorney. Because of my work within the CEO space community, where we teach people the art and science of raising capital, we oftentimes work with securities attorneys, and I think I've worked with probably a dozen of them over the last 9 years. They really help with compliance to make sure that if you are raising capital for your business, that you are in compliance with Securities and Exchange regulations. They typically will help you create the offering documents, and they will counsel you on capital strategies and capital engineering, which means how much money to raise, what percent of your company to sell whenever you raise that money, what your share price might be, and how that share price might grow over different rounds of funding. All of that is the capital engineering process, a part of which is raising capital through investments in others. Capital engineering, by the way, also includes the money that you put into the business and that your founders put into the business and the money that you borrow. That's all part of the capital engineering process as well. But when it comes to raising capital, then you want to make sure that you're working with a securities attorney. And when they work with you, they also work with your corporate law attorney, if you've got one, to help with corporate structure and governance. Because it's extremely important that your corporate structure and your corporate governance be all in great shape, all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed if you go to raising capital. Because if you do not, then you might have a problem years down the road that causes you to have some severe problems when it comes to raising capital, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So generally, if you're even thinking about raising capital for your business, you need to start thinking about engaging the services of a securities attorney. And I advise a lot of people when it comes to raising capital, but the very first thing I say in the book that I wrote on raising capital, called the Capital Coaching Program a couple of years ago, the very first thing I say is get yourself a securities attorney. That's chapter 1 in that book, literally on engaging the services of a securities attorney and all the different types of services that they might provide. As your business grows, you may also find it necessary to engage the services of an employment law attorney to help you out with your agreements with contractors and with employees, to help you make sure that you have good policies in place and practices in place, that you have your HR manual in place. Employment law attorneys can also help you with any disputes that you have with your employees and help with any hiring agreements and any sort of terminations that may be necessary for you in business. And I guarantee you, by the way, just as I guarantee you that you will be working with attorneys if your business is of any size and lasts any time at all, I also guarantee you that you will need to have terminations in your business, because people who show up today don't always show up. Things change in their life. Things also change in your business, such that somebody could be perfect in their position today and be far less than perfect in that position tomorrow. So it's a certainty of business, just as certain it is that you will hire people for your business, that it will become time for you at some point in time to terminate somebody that you are working with. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's consistent with employment law, so you don't get yourself in trouble with any sort of diversity or harassment issues, because that can be very ugly indeed. Employment law attorneys will also help you with any privacy issues that you might have, and as I mentioned, may help you with any discrimination and harassment issues, and especially to avoid those issues. They also, by the way, help with benefits, which is on a very positive side. They can help you decide what benefits that are necessary to have for your employees, and those of which are advantageous. And typically, employment law attorneys know a lot of benefits specialists, so they can point you in the right direction when it comes to making sure that your employees have just the best experience possible when it comes to working with you. The next type of attorneys I want to talk about are the estate attorneys, and I hope that you have your business long enough and prosper significantly enough in your business to where you need to engage the services of an estate attorney to help you protect your assets, to protect yourself, so that you can make sure that you have prevented any sort of liability or any sort of infringement or abridging of the corporate structure, so that somebody can't get at your personal assets whenever they try to come after your company assets, and that you're protected in that way, and that you have some generational planning as well, that you have trusts in place if that's what's right for you, and succession plans with your business so that you can pass along this valuable asset that you are creating in your business to whoever it is that you want to pass it along to. That you can do generational planning for your family to make sure you're protecting your personal assets and are able to pass that along as you want, and able to pass along the business if it's inside the family or outside the family in terms of succession. So those are the types of attorneys that we wanted to talk about today: the corporate law attorney, the intellectual property attorney, the securities attorney, and the estate attorney. So here are some semi-final thoughts. And I say semi-final thoughts because the NCAA playoffs start in the next day or so I wanted to honor them. And also I've got 2 slides of thoughts, so I thought I'd call the one the semi-final one and the other one the final one. So here are the semi-final thoughts. Within the disciplines, attorneys are not all the same. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with, I think, a dozen or so securities attorneys, and each one of them does their job a little bit differently. And that job can vary. In some cases, those securities attorneys will hold the investments in escrow. In some cases, they will actually hold all the description or subscription documents in their files and keep the originals. And in other cases, they don't do either one of those. In some cases, they will give you business advice, and in some cases, they will just do what you told them to do. So within the domain of securities attorneys, all attorneys are not the same, and that is true with every other domain as well. So make sure you understand what it is that your attorney is going to do and what it is that they are not going to do. And a very good question to ask them is, what services are you not providing that you think that I need? What services are you not providing to me that you would advise me to get from another attorney or from another person or do for myself? Is a very, very good question to ask the attorneys. Those attorneys also vary in price and the quality, and as I mentioned, the actual service. I've seen, for example, securities attorneys do their thing anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000 for essentially the same service and essentially the same quality of service. So be sure to consider all of your options. I'm a big fan of the 3-expert rule that I'll talk about in just a second, and be sure to check all of the references that you have with your attorneys. The final thoughts then are that you can use your attorney proactively. Oops, let me go back. You can use your attorney proactively, which means as an insurance policy, to make sure that your agreements are vetted with your attorney and reviewed by attorneys before you sign them, or you can use your attorney reactively, which means picking up the phone and calling your attorney when you need the attorney because you've got some sort of a legal problem. And in my experience, proactively is a lot cheaper. So here's your homework and your exercises. Decide what significant or material means to you. Because one of the pieces of advice I give in my Beyond Business Survival training program has every significant agreement, every material agreement reviewed by an attorney. So you get to decide what that means. So if it's an agreement of over $1,000 or over $5,000 or over $10,000, or maybe it's an agreement that you use in your business day after day after day, so over time that even though it's only a few $100s each time that you use it, if you use an agreement that is only going to be for a few $100 contract and you use it 100 times, I mean that's a $10,000 agreement, and it is material and significant for your business. So decide which ones of your agreements are material and significant and ask for recommendations for attorneys so that you can get those agreements vetted by the attorneys. If you're not experienced in working with attorneys, then use the 3-expert rule. The 3-expert rule, again, I talk about it in my Beyond Business Survival training program, but it's essentially this, that if you're dealing with an area that's outside your experience and outside your expertise, always make sure that you talk to 3 experts and compare what they have to say. If all 3 of them agree, then you've got a pretty good chance of having some pretty good advice. If 2 of them agree and 1 of them disagrees, then you have to weigh it, because the 2 that agree may make a lot more sense to you than the 1 that disagrees. But I've actually had times in my life where I've had 3 experts and 2 of them agree, and the one that didn't agree with the other ones was the one that I ended up using because they just felt right, and in my particular case, they were right. So use the 3-expert rule, but always make sure that you're trusting your own intuition and your own judgment too. And if you've looked at the 3 experts and they 2 agree and 1 disagrees and you can't tell which one's right, or if all 3 disagree, then go find 3 more experts and do it again. And that's the way that you hire attorneys. Ask for references. Make sure you consider your options. Don't go with the first attorney or business consultant or business coach or CPA or any other professional that you run across unless your intuition is telling you that this just feels right, that I've got a really good connection and I know that I can trust this person. Then I always recommend that you follow your heart. But I am a big fan of the 3-expert rule as well. So I encourage you to develop your relationships with your attorneys so that you can better engage with them when you need to do that. And again, use them proactively as appropriate to make sure that you're protecting yourself in the way that you want to. That's our session for today. We're going to have open questions and answers in just a minute where we invite comments and questions on the topic of the day and then any other issues that you want to talk about. I really would like for you to say either in the chat box or maybe in the Brilliant Business group within Facebook, talk to me about what your biggest takeaways were and what insights that you gained from this presentation. And let me know what you're going to focus on. Let me know what you're actually going to do with the advice that I provide to you, because that's what I really want. Having advice, having a dream is 1% of the solution. Having good plans and good advice is another couple of percentage points of the solution. But taking action on that advice and taking action and doing the stuff that you need to do is 97% of success. So tell me what it is that you're actually going to do as a result of this office hours presentation and the advice that you received. And then I want you to post it in the Brilliant Business group. When you go there, you'll see that there is a pinned post at the top of the page about your experiences, good and bad, with attorneys. Let's start a conversation. Let me know what you've come across, and of course any questions that you might want to ask. Go ahead and ask it there, and then I'll do my best to answer it. But the entire community can pitch in as well and provide any sort of guidance and insight that they might have too. Before we get back to the questions and answers, I want to talk a little bit about the programs that I have. They fall in 3 different flavors: consulting and coaching services. I have a library and a membership program, and my Beyond Business Survival CEO training program. First, the services. I'm immediately available to help you with private mentoring, coaching, or consulting, to help with strategic plans, business plans, and financial models. And my programs start as little as just a couple of $100. So if you don't have a business coach or a consultant on your team, or you feel like you could augment the services that are provided by others, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I've also got the Paul Hoyt Library, which contains all of these office hours recordings. This one will be in there along with the 26 previous office hours that we have done on a variety of different topics, along with dozens of business documents and templates and spreadsheets and processes and sample agreements that you can use, and some bonus inspirational messages. And I am adding to the library every single week. There are 3 pricing options for the Paul Hoyt Library. $279 buys you a lifetime membership, or you can buy an annual membership for $79, or the monthly membership is only $9.38. So when you sign up online for $9.38, you have access to all of the information that's in the library. I doubt that you can consume it all in the space of a month, so that's why we have it on a recurring basis. But there's a lot of valuable stuff in there that I've amassed over my 13 years as a business consultant and the previous 31 years I had in business before I became a business consultant. And speaking of that, my flagship product, the Beyond Business Survival program, is that critical small business owner training. It's what you really need to know when you are the CEO so you don't make a lot of critical mistakes. Believe me, I have seen business owners make mistake after mistake after mistake that slowed them down or shut them down, mistakes that cost them $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 or more, and it breaks my heart whenever I see somebody make a mistake that if they'd have just bought the program and received all this advice that I have to offer, that they wouldn't have made that mistake, or at least they would have been alerted to it, much earlier. Maybe they wouldn't have actually consummated the mistake. Maybe they would have caught themselves and saved themselves tens of thousands of dollars. I had a client and a good friend of mine call me up just a couple of weeks ago that said that, I think I've made a $75,000 mistake and maybe even more than that because I didn't have an agreement vetted by an attorney. And my goodness, I just think that if he had listened to my program, that maybe he wouldn't have made that mistake. So Beyond Business Survival is a self-paced on-demand learning program. It's audio with complete transcripts and dozens of critical success principles, things that you really need to know if you're a small business owner. The price for the program is only $497, and today it comes with a bonus, which includes, if you buy the program today for $497, it comes with a lifetime membership in the Paul Hoyt Library, which is a $279 value. So you get a tremendous amount of value for just a few $100. And I strongly encourage you to purchase that program. So I also want you to join me on Facebook as a personal friend. Or you can, and I also encourage you to like my Paul Hoyt business page. So if you look in the search bar on Facebook and look up Paul Hoyt, you'll find me as a person and you'll find me my business, which is also branded under my name. I invite you to connect in both of those ways. And as we've mentioned several times, join the Brilliant Business Group so that we can chat with each other online and that you can enjoy the power of a brilliant business community. Also, when you do that, you'll get your energy of the day. Every morning I post an inspirational message. Today's message was on brain, which is the word of the day, the energy of the day. I invite you to look that up online. I think we're 105 consecutive days into it, on my goal of 1,500 consecutive days of posting an energy of the day. Big news for today is that I'll return on April 7th. As I mentioned at the start of our broadcast today, I'm taking the next couple of weeks off to go to the CEO Space Conference. So when we get back, the topic is to be determined, and I think the format is a little bit to be determined as well. So let me know what you would like for me to talk about by going to paulsurvey.com and letting me know what topics are of most interest to you. Do your homework when it comes to attorneys. And now we're going to go into the open questions and answers. I invite you to ask questions and have any sort of comments that you may have on the subject of the day, and then any other issues that you have, especially your takeaways and the insights that you've got from today's conversation. Go to paulsurvey.com, let me know what you want me to talk about, and contact me by sending me an email or giving me a phone call or going to schedulepaul.com and picking a time where you and I can make sure that we connect with a private one-on-one conversation. So with that, I'm going to open it up a little bit. And Audra, did we have any questions or comments during today's presentation?
Paul, we have a few questions and some comments. Ron says, bravo, the 3 expert rule, where one can outdo the other 2.
Yep. Thank you for that.
And we also have somebody reminding us not to confuse right with legal.
That is a good one, and that probably merits just, you know, a little bit of question too. There's things that come up for me whenever I hear that is just because you have the legal rights to be able to do something doesn't make sure that it's right and in integrity with the person that you are. You know, and it's one of the examples that I have for that. Sometimes I work with clients who get a little bit behind, and when they get a little bit too far behind, I cut them off because that's the right thing to do for my business. You know, business success principle number 2 in the key performance area of financial management is all about managing your credit and your credit policies. So if a client gets behind with me, you know, that means that after some period of time that I'm not going to provide services to them anymore. And I have the legal right to go after them. I have the legal right, because of the contracts that I have in place, to go after them in a court of law, to you know, really pursue that in some way. But I choose not to do that because it doesn't feel the right thing for me to do whenever I'm in integrity. When somebody's having a tough time, that's generally not the time to kick them in the teeth or to try to squeeze blood from a turnip. It just doesn't feel right to do that. So even though you have the legal right to do something, doesn't mean that it's the moral thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do. It's the right thing for you to do by yourself or by, you know, the world in general. And those of you who know me, you'll know that I'm a huge proponent of personal growth and spiritual growth in addition to being a proponent of business growth. So when it comes to being right, that means being right with yourself, right with your maker, if you've got that kind of analogy or relationship in place, even though that you may have the legal right to do something. So thank you for spurring me to make that little comment there. What else do we have, Audra?
So my friend or sister, uncle, brother-in-law, whoever, is an attorney. So I really don't need to...
Oops, say that again. I lost that. Your microphone.
Oh, sorry about that. So I really don't need to hire one, right?
No, that's not true. And it kind of depends on who your friend, brother-in-law, whoever is. My daughter-in-law, by the way, is an attorney. So I dearly love at least one attorney in this world. She is a precious person and a great artist and a former attorney. She's not practicing now because she's decided to go into artwork. So there's a lot of wonderful attorneys out there. But I think it's a pretty good idea to pay people for their field of expertise and their area of expertise, even if it's a friend or a brother-in-law or whatever. Because I know, you know, as focused as I am, as clear as I am, as conscious as I am, as powerful as I am, there's a difference in between almost always when I'm working with somebody for free and when I'm working with somebody that has paid me money, especially good money, paid the asking price. They get just a little more attention and they get just a little more conscientious attitude. And I can think of only one exception to that, you know, in the last 10 or 12 years that I've been doing business, where somebody just touched my heart so much that I did business with them for free for a while, and I treated them like they were my most valuable client. But for the most part, and most of us, and I'm guessing that goes for most every attorney in the world, because they are one of us too, is that there is a subconscious different, and there's a subconscious personal agenda between the relationships where you're getting paid top dollar for your expertise and those relationships where you're giving it away or providing a service at an incredible discount. So my encouragement is that if you want the job done in the best way possible, with the best possible experts giving their most conscientious advice and service, then pay them for their services and pay them well for their services, because it will make a difference in in the quality of the service and the quantity of the service that you receive? Great question. Next topic, Audra.
So how do you feel about going to someplace like Nolo.com and just buying pre-made contracts and things online?
My experience with them has not been very good. I've seen a lot of pre-made contracts, and they can do pretty good for you to create a contract for yourself. But if it's a material contract, if it is a significant contract to your business, you definitely want to have that vetted and reviewed by an attorney. So one of the things that I've done in the past is create my own contracts and use those to discuss business terms and the business relationships with my contractors or suppliers. And then once we had agreed upon that, then take that, what was in semi-legalese or my best attempt at legalese, and get it vetted or reviewed by an attorney. So you can start that way. You can start by looking at the stuff on Nolo, or just going online and say, sample bill of sale or sample private placement memorandum or sample whatever, and go and take a look at it. But the challenge is you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know whether to leave a clause in or leave a clause out, and you especially don't know about the clauses that might just happen to be missing from the agreement that you chose that could be incredibly significant to your particular business because of your particular situation. So again, you can use those as a starting point, but it's my strong recommendation for every material contract, for every significant contract, that you have that vetted and reviewed by an attorney that you trust and that you've worked with for a while. Next question, Audra.
Paul, this is mostly for me and a suggestion, and wonder how you feel about it.
Okay.
In my business, I have migrated from the sort of very legalese sounding documents to something called a Memorandum of Understanding. And what I like to do is, like what you suggest, is write everything up in English first, make sure that the customer understands what we're talking about, and then at the end, where there has to be legalese, of course that gets added to the memorandum, but it makes for a much more friendly document as long as everything is legally correct. It doesn't have to be written in obtuse legalese.
I agree 100% with that, and I think all of my agreements are written that way. I use as a pattern for my agreements, by the way, a book called Getting to Agreement by a good friend of mine, Stuart Levine. Stuart and Audra, I don't know if you can type that into the chat box or not. Stuart Levine, last name is spelled L-E-V-I-N-E. And Stuart has this book called Getting to Agreement that really talks about the fundamentals of agreements, and he offers a 10-step framework for getting to agreement, for reaching agreement. And it's, by the way, that framework is one of the many documents that's in my library. So if you sign up for the library, you can have access to that document right away. But his principle is exactly that we write it out in business terms, and then we add legalese only as necessary, indemnification clauses, and other common legal clauses that should be in most every agreement that you have can be added to the end of that. And my favorite attorneys are those attorneys that will work with you in common everyday language. And by the way, that is much more common when it comes to general business contracts and partnership agreements and joint venture agreements than it is in things like intellectual property agreements, which is really dealing with the federal government, and in securities law, where there are essential restrictions or guidance. For example, the securities law says that you have to deliver offering documents which are essentially consistent with those required by companies that have to file public documents and public offering documents. So there is a requirement, a legal requirement, when it comes to your securities documents that is not the same. It's a much higher standard of legalese than is required for general business agreements. But Audra, I agree with you 100% when it comes to general business agreements. Write it out first. Use the pattern, the template that Stuart Levine provides in his book, or that you can get in my library as the template for your agreement, And then if it's significant, if it's material, if it's over $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever, wherever you draw that line, if it's significant to you and material to you, and that is to you, by the way. It's not necessarily whether it's significant to the other person, because they might be a billionaire and what's significant to them isn't at all significant to you. Or rather, what is not significant to them is extremely significant to you. If it's significant to you, make sure that you get it vetted by your attorney, because you're trying to protect your own self. Thank you, Audra. Next question.
Actually, this is a little bit of a follow-up to that.
Okay.
Something that I also learned from a customer with whom I had a memorandum in place. We actually had a memorandum signing and review meeting. And during that meeting, we sat on Skype together and we read each clause of the contract and we made sure we both agreed what it meant. And that was one of the most unstressful, happy contract signings I've ever had with a customer. And that's something I want to do from here on out.
That is great, and I do that as well, by the way. So if you were to contract with me to do a business plan or some other significant engagement, one of the things that we would do would be to go through that agreement step by step by step, just to make sure that you understood what was in it and make sure that you agreed to the terms and conditions that are in that agreement. That is a best practice, is to step through the agreement with the parties who are signing it, 2 or 3 parties that are signing it, clause by clause, just to make sure that you are in agreement and that everybody understands that those particular clauses are in there. So thanks for adding that. I appreciate it. Any other questions for today?
And we have some more feedback from Ron.
Okay.
So more comments, less questions. Ron is saying that Nolo Press is wonderful for communicating strange, new, and difficult legal terms and concepts most easily to the average layperson. So it's still a good resource to go look around at.
Great. Thank you, Ron.
And for digital signing, this is also me, Audrey, having my geek on. I use a service called HelloSign, and they have a free digital document signing service. You can do like 5 documents a month. And I use that now for making it very easy for customers to sign contracts. They can do it by logging into HelloSign. They don't really need an account. They just verify their identity, and you get an audit trail of who looked at the document. You can make them initial individual parts. It's a really nice system to use.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know anything about that. I'm still, with my agreements, requesting people to print out the signature page and sign it and fax it or scan it back to me. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for that, Audra. Next question or comment.
And one final comment, and this is from Audrey School of Hard Knocks. Don't confuse a really good contract with your customer's ability to do a chargeback. That's all I'm going to say.
We talked about that a little bit. A couple of weeks ago, or 3 or 4 weeks ago, one of our office hours presentation was essentially everything that you need to know about working with credit cards. And one of the big topics in there was the issue of chargebacks and why I don't generally take credit cards if it's over $1,000 because there's too much risk involved in that. So, and that's strongly my encouragement to you too, is that anything that's significant to your business, any amount of money that's material or significant, or especially if this is the first time that you've engaged with a client, is you don't want to use the credit card feature. You want to make sure they transfer the money to you or send you a check, because you have a lot more rights and you are protected a lot more in case of a disagreement or dispute down the road. We have a little bit of time before the top of the hour. I don't know if we have any other comments or questions, but if we don't, I just want to open it up to talk about anything that you want to talk about. As most of you know, that in addition to being passionate about being a business consultant, I'm equally passionate about encouraging people to play the awakening game, which is what I call the art and science of working on yourself every day, focusing on becoming a little wiser, a little kinder, a little happier, a little more peaceful, a little more powerful every single day. So I welcome any sort of comments or questions when it comes to personal growth and the relationship between personal growth and business growth too. So I'm not sure if we got any more comments or questions in that limited time, but but I'm eager to chat about those subjects as well. Anything else coming through, Audra?
No, Paul, I think we've answered everybody's questions.
Well, then I think we will close it down early for today with a reminder for a couple of things. Number one is that we're not going to do office hours for the next couple of weeks because I'll be at the CEO Space Business Growth Conference. And if you're a CEO Space member, come in for the weekend. That's free except for your travel and your room and board. And I'd love to have a conversation with you and see you again at that conference. And if you're not a member of CEO Space, then give me a call, and maybe coming this next Sunday, just this one following up is just exactly the right thing for your business. So we'll resume 2 weeks from today. I think that's on April something like 4th or 7th or something like that. I looked it up once. But anyway, we'll come back in the first part of April, and we'll have our next office hours conversation at noon Pacific. And until we meet again, this has been Paul Hoyt, thanking you for attending and wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.